January 7th, 1980. A 14-year-old boy, full of promise and life, steps onto his front porch at night, only to vanish without a trace. 20 minutes later, his lifeless body is discovered face down in a snow-filled ditch 2 blocks away. His death brutal and inexplicable, strangled but without a single sign of struggle, his belongings untouched. Was it a random act of violence, or something far more sinister? A web of strange events, cryptic letters, and unanswered questions all point to one chilling possibility. Someone had been watching, waiting. But the question remains: who killed Bill Comeans, and why? This is a case that refuses to let go. Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us, the channel where we dive deep into the most chilling and mysterious cold cases. If you are hooked, hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments to help us grow. On a bitterly cold evening in New Rome, Ohio, a young 14-year-old named William Comeans vanished without a trace. What began as a normal night would end in horror, an unsolved homicide that would haunt a community forever. William, or Bill as he was more commonly known, spent most of his evening helping his father, Robert, work on the family car. It was supposed to be a simple night, nothing more than a bonding moment between father and son. At around 8:50 p.m., Bill walked to a neighbor's house 2 doors down to pick up his younger sister from a birthday party. But when he arrived, she was still deep into the celebration. She wanted to stay longer, and Bill, the dutiful, doting older brother, agreed to return later. He told his mother his sister was running late, then returned to the garage to help his dad. A few minutes later, Bill was seen in the front yard taking down the last of the Christmas decorations he had carefully hung weeks earlier. But just 20 minutes later, Robert Comeans stepped outside to check on his son, only to find his efforts interrupted. Bill had vanished, without a word, without a trace. Robert was bewildered. His son would never leave without telling anyone. Bill had made a habit of keeping his parents informed, even when simply stepping across the yard. Robert checked with his wife, Carol. No one had heard from Bill. Panic set in. The police were called. Robert and a neighbor began searching the streets, shortly followed by his 2 worried brothers. Minutes felt like hours. Desperation consumed them. And then, just 2 blocks from their home, they found him. Bill was lying face down in a snow-filled ditch near the Conrail railroad tracks. His body was cold, his life brutally snatched away. His scarf was knotted tightly around his neck. He had been strangled. His brothers Michael and Bob soon arrived at the scene. In an agonizing frenzy, they tried to revive him, but it was too late. Neighbors gathered around, helpless, their faces filled with disbelief. The brothers continued in their desperate but futile attempts to revive Bill until the paramedics arrived. Bill was rushed to Doctors West Hospital by ambulance. Despite the doctor's best efforts, Bill was pronounced dead at 11 p.m. The world for his family came crashing down. Detectives quickly discovered something chilling. Bill's father, Robert, believed his son had been abducted, but the evidence told a different story. There was no sign of a struggle in the yard. No indication that Bill had fought to escape. There was nothing to suggest a forced abduction. The scene was compromised by dozens of panicked family and neighbors, and witnesses, or leads, were scarce. Bill's body showed no defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle. His possessions had not been taken. Robbery was quickly ruled out as a motive. A beer bottle and a kitchen knife were found at the scene and collected as evidence. The autopsy confirmed what detectives feared. Bill had died from a cardiac arrest due to compression of the neck from a ligature. But there was something even more puzzling. Bill had Valium in his system, a sedative. How had he ingested it? Bill Comeans was a model student, musically talented, loved by his family, respected by his peers. On the surface, he had everything to live for. But beneath the surface, there were signs of something far darker. In the fall of 1979, Bill had gone to the police after discovering a series of threatening letters in his school locker. Ominous messages warning of his impending death. The origin of the letters was never discovered. Then, in September, Bill was attacked while riding his bicycle. Two men ambushed him in a wooded area behind Prairie Lincoln Elementary, strangling him with a bike's inner tube. He barely escaped with his life. The police found the discarded tire tube, a trash bag, and a chilling note that read, "He was warned." But the attacks didn't stop there. Just a month later, Bill was attacked again whilst out collecting money from his paper route, this time by two men in a light blue car. They tried to strangle him with a rope, but Bill fought them off. He lost consciousness. He woke up hours later, disorientated with rope burns around his neck and a gash on his face. Disorientated, he stumbled home at 1 a.m. The police became skeptical of his story and asked Bill to take a polygraph test. The results were inconclusive. Some investigators believed Bill knew more than he was letting on. Others thought he might have been fabricating the attacks entirely. Then, just months after his death, the letters started again, this time threatening his entire neighborhood. 8 homes on Maple Avenue received identical notes, each more chilling than the last. For the people of New Rome, the nightmare was just beginning. Was the killer still out there? Was the community being watched? Then, in a shocking twist, the letter's author was revealed. Eileen Tope, one of Bill's neighbors, confessed to writing the threatening messages, but she denied any involvement in Bill's murder. Despite her bizarre behavior, she was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Eileen, suffering from a nervous breakdown, claimed to be a victim of her own mind, struggling with what doctors suspected to be a multiple personality disorder. But the killer remained elusive. Bill Comeans' murder was never solved. The case went cold, and over the years, investigators found themselves divided. Some thought it was an accident, whilst others insisted it was a murder. In January 2014, Bill's murder made headlines again after a Twitter handle @BillComeans tweeted, "34 years ago today, I was murdered. I was 14 years old and had my entire life to live. My family is still looking for my killer." In a twist of fate, it was Bill's sister, Kathleen, who conceived a brilliant idea to bring new attention to her brother's cold case. Desperate for answers, she turned to an unlikely source, Twitter. Her hope was simple, yet profound, that the power of social media could spark the break her family so desperately needed. Meanwhile, the evidence from that fateful night, scattered and haunting, sat in a forgotten evidence room. A scarf, a knife, a beer bottle, each item, once vital to the investigation, now left to gather dust in the cold, sterile space, kept safe with the belief that technological advancements might one day reveal their secrets. Among those forgotten items, there was one piece that held promise, a microscopic trace of unknown DNA, so minute, so fragile, that investigators at the time feared the slightest misstep could destroy it forever. And so they waited, holding out hope that time and science would provide the breakthrough they needed. Years have passed and the cold case stubbornly resisted the probing light of truth. Then came the devastating blow. That very DNA sample, so small, so elusive, returned inconclusive. The answer that everyone had hoped for, that every moment that led toward, remained just beyond reach. The truth remains locked away, forever a mystery. 2 questions. Who killed Bill Comeans? And more haunting still, why? Is the killer or killers still out there, lurking in the shadows, their identities cloaked in mystery? Or is this a tragic tale of death by misadventure, as some detectives from the Sheriff's Department have suggested? The case remains open, the search for answers endless. Now, we turn back the clock to take a deeper dive into the chilling timeline of this haunting and unresolved mystery. September and October 1979. Threatening notes found at school. Bill Comeans was a freshman at Westland High School. He begins receiving cryptic and chilling notes. Over the course of the fall, he discovers 3 or 4 threatening messages in his school locker, each one different, some typed, some handwritten, and some clipped from magazines. The notes are unnerving in their simplicity and menace. "Blood will spill," one reads. "It's your turn," says another. Perhaps the most chilling, "Bill has 3 months left. P.S. Make the best of it." Bill isn't alone. His best friend and another girl from school also find similar notes in their lockers, each one typed in red ink. They read, "You are next." Even after Bill's death, the haunting notes continue. A final one is discovered at Westland High School. "You are next," it warns, signed with a sinister red S. Bill's parents recall the discovery, though deputies refuse to confirm the note's existence. As the investigation deepens, law enforcement compares Bill's handwriting with that of the threatening notes, a clue that may lead to something darker. The 5th of September 1979, Wednesday, first assault, 8:30 p.m. Bill is on his way home from a friend's house when he cuts through the woods behind Prairie Lincoln Elementary. 50 yards into the woods, Bill is suddenly ambushed. Two unknown men attack him from behind. They wrap a plastic garbage bag around his head and tie a bicycle inner tube around his neck. Bill loses consciousness, but in a desperate moment of clarity, he frees himself. Bruised and gasping for air, Bill returns home, his neck marked by the strangulation attempt. Bill's father takes him to the sheriff's department to file a complaint. Despite the assault, Bill is unable to describe his assailants. Police recover the inner tube, the plastic bag, and Bill's bike at the scene. A note is left behind. He was warned. 22nd of October 1979, Monday, the second assault, 6:30 p.m. Bill is out collecting money for his paper route near Beacon Hill Road and Maple Drive when two men in an aqua-colored older model car leap out and attack him. They tie a rope around his neck and leave him for dead under a tree. Bill lays there unconscious for hours, hidden by shrubs and tree branches. 5.5 hours later, Bill regains consciousness and stumbles home, barely able to walk. He arrives at 1 a.m. His neck bears the marks of the rope and a gash on the right side of his face. Bill's brother Bob recalls the day as being wet and rainy, but he noted Bill's clothes were dry. Bill tells his parents about the attack. The assault is too much. He quits his paper route after this terrifying incident. Bill visits a doctor and files a second assault report with the sheriff's office. He describes his assailants as two white males, likely in their late teens or early 20s. Detectives start to doubt the veracity of Bill's complaint. Some believe he is hiding the identity of his attackers, whilst others believe Bill is fabricating the entire story. 4 days later, Bill undergoes a polygraph test at the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation in London, Ohio. Investigators claim Bill's test indicates some signs of deception. The 7th of January 1980, Monday, the tragic event, 9 p.m. It's a typical winter evening. Bill's mother is in the kitchen and Bill's father is in the garage working on the family car. Bill's sister, Kathleen, is at a birthday party 2 houses down. Bill goes to pick her up, but she asks for a little more time. Bill agrees and leaves, returning home and informing his mother of his sister's delay. He then proceeds to methodically take down the Christmas decorations he had patiently put up the weeks prior. Bill then brings his father a coffee. He walks between the garage and the porch, never to be seen alive again. Almost 20 minutes later, the family grows alarmed. Bill's parents state that Bill would never leave the house without telling them. Bill is nowhere to be found. They believe he has been abducted. They call law enforcement and report Bill is possibly abducted. Bill's father and a neighbor begin searching the area. They cover Maple Drive, Canard Avenue, and Buena Vista Avenue. Bill's 2 brothers, Mike and Bob, go searching the opposite sides of Maple Drive and encounter a patrol car and briefly speak with the officer regarding Bill's disappearance. They decide to head back home to get their car and make their way up Buena Vista Avenue. Robert and the neighbor discovered Bill's body face down in the snow in a desolate patch of land littered with broken bottles, rusted car parts, and other debris. It was near the Conrail railroad tracks, just 2 blocks from home. Only a 5-minute walk or a 20-second drive to the spot. The winter scarf he was wearing is knotted tightly around his neck. Bill's brother Mike uses a penknife to remove the scarf. Bill's brother and father try desperately to revive him with CPR until the ambulance arrives. By this stage, upwards of 40 people, including EMS, the fire department, the police department, family, and residents, have converged on the scene. Bill is rushed to Doctors West Hospital by ambulance. The items of evidence recovered at the homicide site include a knife, a beer bottle, and Bill's scarf. Law enforcement determines that, aside from the strangulation, there are no signs of violence or struggle, no marks on Bill's body, and no evidence to suggest he was robbed. At this stage, they are unsure whether his death was the result of homicide or a tragic event. At about 11 p.m., despite the doctor's best efforts, Bill is pronounced dead at Doctors Hospital West. The 22nd of April 1980, Tuesday, the coroner's report is released. Coroner William Adrian officially rules Bill Comeans' death a homicide, based on his findings, the results of the autopsy, and the investigation conducted by the Sheriff's Department. The cause of death is determined to be cardiac arrest resulting from compression of the neck by a ligature. The manner of death is confirmed through petechial hemorrhaging, which strongly indicates that Bill was strangled. The toxicology report reveals the presence of diazepam, or Valium, in Bill's bloodstream. However, law enforcement finds no evidence suggesting Bill was a habitual drug user, nor can they determine how he may have ingested the drug. Bill's parents also state that Bill had no such access to any drugs in the family home. The autopsy also reveals internal injuries consistent with strangulation, as well as facial hemorrhaging. There are no other visible wounds on Bill's body. Coroner Adrian calls the case extremely bizarre, further deepening the mystery surrounding Bill's death. July 21st to October 31st, 1980. Neighbors on Maple Drive begin receiving threatening letters. Between 13 and 19 threatening notes are delivered to 8 families living within 200 yards of each other on Maple Drive, or in close proximity to the Comeans home. These families include Comeans, Tope. The letters are delivered on the same days, with some mailed and others hand-delivered at night. In some instances, the notes are found tied to porches or cars using leather belts, straps, or tape. The first of these notes is hand-delivered on September 9th, 1980. The notes arrive at irregular intervals, sometimes only 4 days apart, other times as much as 33 days. The handwriting on the letters is described in 2 ways, either crudely printed or neatly penciled on pieces of cut-out envelope. Handwriting analysis later reveals that all the notes are written by the same person, though it's unclear whether the pre-death notes were included in this analysis. The messages are brief, often only 3 or 4 words, sometimes in poorly constructed sentences. Among these messages reported in the press are, "Parents should guard their children carefully," signed X. "Time is short. Name redacted is next." 7 neighborhood females ranging in age from 7 to 50 specifically named. All have been warned. Death in October. You are next. It's time. Left the night before Halloween. Law enforcement believes the letter writer could be connected to Bill Comeans' death. On the 2nd of November 1980, authorities labeled the letter writer as a terrorist and traveled to Syracuse to create a psychological profile of the suspect. December 1980. Eileen J. Tope, 54, of 387 Maple Drive, is arrested for writing the threatening letters to her neighbors from July to Halloween. Tope, a clerk at the Ohio Department of Taxation, lives with her husband, retired mail carrier Willard Tope, 56. They have been residents of the neighborhood for 7 years and have 4 adult children. In November, a psychiatrist allegedly diagnoses Eileen with dual personalities, although this diagnosis is tentative. She had suffered nervous breakdowns in 1973 and 1974 and spent 3 weeks as a psychiatric inpatient in University Hospital shortly following the writing of the last note on mischief night, the night before Halloween. As the neighborhood grows alarmed by the threatening notes, Tope claims to have been one of the first to receive a note and becomes actively involved in the community's response. Early on, she tells the Columbus Dispatch, "This is a sick joke or someone ready to go off the deep end." Tope also reports to the police that 2 men tried to force her into a van near her home. She makes multiple calls to law enforcement about prowlers, threatening phone calls, and attempted break-ins. However, this leads law enforcement to question Tope's credibility as her claims cannot be substantiated. On November 11th, the county sheriff executes a search warrant at her desk at the Department of Taxation, after Tope refuses to provide a handwriting sample or submit to a polygraph test. Tope is charged with disorderly conduct and pleads no contest. During the court proceedings, it's reported that she faints and falls to the floor, something she allegedly does several times after being confronted. She is fined $50, half the maximum fine of $100. The charge: recklessly causing inconvenience, annoyance, and alarm to others by engaging in threatening behavior, especially in relation to the death of William Comeans. Miss Comeans, once a good friend of Tope, says, "She was a good friend, but I don't even want to look at her now." Despite the arrest, law enforcement states that they do not consider Eileen Tope a suspect in Bill Comeans' death or in the writing of the notes he received. By September 1981, law enforcement introduces a new theory about Bill's death, that it was a tragic accident, possibly the result of autoerotic asphyxiation. The NYPD is consulted and agrees with the theory, while the FBI calls the cause of death inconclusive. Despite this, the coroner maintains the ruling of homicide and refuses to comment further. The homicide investigation is officially ongoing, though detectives publicly state they no longer believe Bill was murdered. One deputy coroner suggests the homicide ruling was simply to keep the case open. Investigators point out that there were no signs of struggle at the scenes of Bill's first two attacks. They note that despite heavy rain, Bill's clothes and shoes were not soiled. Furthermore, they claim that Bill's responses to the lie detector test were indicative of an attempt to deceive. The chaotic scene where Bill dies complicates the investigation. With 35 to 40 people present, including panic-stricken family members and emergency responders, the death scene becomes a muddled one, hindering the investigation. A teacher tells police that, before his death, Bill had asked him questions about how to make oneself pass out. The case remains open as a homicide with no clear answers in sight. This is truly a disturbing and baffling case, 45 years later, and we still have no answers. On one hand, law enforcement suggests that this could be a tragic case of death by misadventure, possibly the result of autoerotic asphyxiation. On the other, many detectives, along with the Comeans family, are convinced that their beloved son and brother was cruelly murdered by a twisted individual or group. So what do you think? Was it a horrific accident, or does the evidence point to something far more sinister? We'd love to hear your thoughts and theories. Let us know in the comments below. Thank you, and see you next time.